Welcome back, everybody, to Moms Like Me, powered by Support Now. I am so excited to have another opportunity to speak with a creator, soon to be remarried wife, mom, and social media, really social media evangelist for all things grief, Whitney Allen. Whitney, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. So Whitney and I met probably about a year ago when we first started exploring partnering with creators that have been through all types of major life moments. And Whitney's Instagram page caught our eye as being super authentic with her journey with loss of her spouse, Brian. And so in today's episode, I really want to talk a little bit more about losing a spouse and all of that goes into supporting someone that is going through not just loss, but traumatic loss. And certainly what happened to Brian would be considered sudden and traumatic by all means. So Whitney, I'd love, if you don't mind, by starting with kind of what happened. I think people are always naturally curious about what happened, what was the lead up to this, but for you to share a little bit more about him.
So, oh my gosh, we're going back now to October 2021 at this point. So my late husband, Ryan, was a canine officer at the time. We really were in like the height of our marriage. We're in the height of our family and our careers. October 12th, 2021, we celebrated our 8-year wedding anniversary. So we had been together for around a decade, but married for 8 years. I was pregnant with our second child, 26 weeks pregnant. And everything was just like, I remember thinking to myself, like, it doesn't really get much better than this. Like, this is perfect. I was working as an attorney at the time, as a medical malpractice defense attorney, moving up in the ranks in my firm. Like everything was planned out. Everything was settled. Like, we finally were in our 30s and, we had our present figured out. We had our future figured out. And then 2 days after October 12th, on October 14th, Ryan had a day off from work, which was pretty rare. Like in the middle of the week, he had shift work. So it was just like a random Thursday afternoon. He came home after the gym and he told me he got stung by a bee. And then like several moments later, he started feeling really unwell. And it was just kind of a cascade of effects where like he had told me he gotten stung. I knew right away what was going on, called 911. And then I found him passed out on our front porch because I was trying to call 911 and get like Benadryl and like all these things. And he walked downstairs and outside. It took like 10 minutes for the EMS to get there. His heart stopped at a point like after the EMS got there, and they weren't able to start his heart for approximately 20 minutes or more. I'm actually not sure like the exact amount of time. It was too much. And that really started like the journey of losing my husband and then trying to get him to the point where he would regain consciousness. But unfortunately, despite all of the best efforts of us, like doing all the things, like talking to him and stimulating him, getting him the best medical care, all the best doctors, getting admitted to one of the best brain rehabs in the country. We were basically told in February of 2022, so around 5 months into this ordeal, that scans showed that the parts of his brain that were deprived of oxygen during that period that he went into cardiac arrest were like no longer there. And those were the parts that like make you a person. So basically they told us there is no hope for a meaningful recovery, meaning he would just be a body in a bed if he continued to survive physically. And people don't really understand that, yes, like although you're physically here, like how you live your life and how you're able to relate to people and interact with your family. And if you're able to talk and do all these things, like that's really what makes a person. It's not a physical body so much. So myself and Ryan's family made the very hard decision to put him on hospice. And what that looks like with someone that suffered an anoxic brain injury. So when you're deprived of oxygen, is you withdraw all life-sustaining care. So you withdraw the peg tube that he had that was feeding him artificially, and then you also withdraw hydration or water because we don't have death with dignity in Pennsylvania, which would be like a euthanasia situation that some states offer. I wish we had that. That would have been a lot better than what we went through. So Ryan was admitted on hospice on March 17th, 2022, which is actually ironically the 10-year anniversary of our meeting on St. Patrick's Day. And he died 22 days later on April 7th, 2022.
Wow. Wow. I'm so curious. You said, you were forced to make a series of very difficult decisions. Had you ever talked about this as a couple of, God forbid something happened where I wasn't be able to advocate for myself? Were those conversations you had?
I'm trying to think because I think Ryan was really, he didn't really like to talk about death a lot because he knew because of his job, like that was already always a possibility. So although we had some things in place, like if something were to happen to either of us, like we had life insurance, thank goodness, and he had like a lot of different like insurance policies at work, in case he was injured and stuff like that. So like we were prepared in that sense, but like we had never talked about, or he had never shared with me like if we're in this very unique situation, like what he would want. So I was really left with trying to ask myself, like objectively what's best, like what makes sense, and then also what he would want, which was very hard. And like if you're listening, if you've ever been through trauma, it's really hard to be rational and make those really hard decisions when you're grieving because you're in denial, you're in shock, you're numb, you're not thinking logically at that point. So I feel like a lot of my decisions would have been different had I not been like, it hadn't been in trauma, right? Or if it hadn't been my husband, because I would have been able to think more logically about it. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. It does. And I think it's so hard to plan for the unpredictable. I mean,
Yeah.
you said you knew what was happening right away. Had you ever had any sense that there could be an allergy, or like, was there any indication that something like this was plausible for him?
No, I mean, I mean, he had been stung by bees before. Nothing had happened. He had like seasonal allergies, but it's like he wasn't allergic to, you have like some people are allergic to all the things. So it's always like a possibility. Like he was not one of those people. He didn't have any known allergies to anything except maybe like, being outside and in the spring and the pollen and stuff. But this was not something we would have been even like prepared for. Like we didn't have an EpiPen or anything.
Wow. And you had a baby all like through all of this?
Yeah. So I was 26 weeks pregnant when Ryan's accident happened. And then I had our second son, Leo, January 8th. So like a few months after his accident. So he was still in the hospital. So it was right in like the middle of all of this stuff going on.
Whitney, describe how do you describe that version of yourself, having like the circumstances around your husband, having to birth a baby and knowing and seeing, it sounds like you knew that there was some really harsh realities to face. Did you even know who you were in those moments?
No, you lose complete like sight of who you are. You're a completely different person. Like when you're faced with these very like life or death situations, like you're just trying to survive, especially when like you're a mom and you have a baby on the way. It's robotic. It's like animalistic almost because it's like you're just in survival and you're like, I just need to take care of like my young and like the people in my life and keep them safe and like eating and basically like that's it. Like you're on autopilot.
I'd imagine there were a lot of people also in shock hearing this and trying to navigate it. How did the community show up? How did family show up for you? Was it helpful?
Yeah, so because of who Ryan was in the community, like he was so beloved. like so many people that I didn't even realize he knew or like had touched, like so many people in the community were touched by his story. And I started sharing updates on Facebook. So the community support was overwhelming, and same for the canine community that he was a part of and his police department. I mean, it was overwhelming. It was wonderful. People were sending food and gift cards and checks, and like it was, I there's no words that I can really explain to thank these people and to show gratitude. And in the moment, it really doesn't feel good. And I know that's like so weird to say, but like although these things were helpful, it becomes like, oh, I don't even want this. This doesn't even feel right because I hate that I'm in this situation to have to receive this support. So I didn't really know how to show. It was too overwhelming to be able to like show the support that it probably deserved. And I know other people that I've talked to, they kind of have that same realization. Like it's hard to be grateful when the reason you're receiving support is because this awful thing has happened.
Yeah.
But like logistically and practically, all of the support I received was very helpful.
And I'm sure it's one of those things where in the moment, it sounds like in the moment, it's hard to be grateful. It's hard to be appreciative because you're just almost rejecting the reality of the situation. And over time, you've been able to collect a sense of gratitude as you have more sensibility about you, as you move out of that shocked phase. Is that a realistic, or is that a fair like summary?
Yeah, because I mean, when you go through a traumatic loss, you're purely in survival. Like part of your brain is like not even working at that point. And as you transition out of that fight or flight mode, you get back so much of like what makes you human, like the empathy part and the gratitude part, because you get to live beyond just like moment to moment. So now it's like I can really access that gratitude for all the support that I received that was almost impossible to access in the moment.
And I think that's a really important point though for people that want to be supportive in situations like this. It's so important to manage your expectations of like what a thank you might look like. You may never get it.
Yeah.
You may get it months or years later, and it doesn't go unnoticed. And I think so often, whether we realize it or not, we support because we expect something in exchange. And this is, I think your situation, this example is a really important one to reinforce that if you want to support, but do it because you really want to show up for someone, you really want to do something for that person, not because you're waiting for someone to say thank you back.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. It has to be completely unconditional and with no strings attached. Like I have hundreds of cards that I haven't read yet because I haven't gotten to reading them. Like they're stored in my basement because it was that overwhelming for me in the moment. And it's like I hope to read all those, but I can't. These people that were so generous during that time, it would be impossible to be able to reach out to everybody.
Yeah. How challenging was it to have your husband for 5 months after everything and yet not have him? And I'd love for you to describe that because there's a phrase that you talk about a lot on Instagram that I think most people are less familiar with. It's called anticipatory grief. But I'd love for you to share a little bit more about what that feels like, because it's a really, I think, an often misunderstood or not noticed at all from people that have never been in a situation like you have.
Anticipatory grief, it looks different on everyone because each person's story is so different. Mine was pretty extreme because I went from, like a full functioning husband to like somebody that literally didn't even know I was in a room, right? And he couldn't do anything for himself. So there's different levels of like anticipatory grief. And for me, it was as if like, although Ryan was physically here, like everything that made him a person, everything that made him the person that I loved, everything that made him my husband and father of my kids, like was gone. And it feels like just like when someone dies. It really does. Because parts of the person that you knew and parts of your life are no longer available to you. So whether somebody has a loved one that has dementia or they get a cancer diagnosis, or somebody gets into an accident and they have like deficits because of that accident. You grieve the parts of your life that you can no longer have because your person is not the person they were before. Because everything changes. Even if it's not as extreme as my case, so many things in your life are going to change when something tragic happens.
Right.
And all of those things are you are grieving. You are grieving the person that you lost, the life that you had, your future together, and what that looks like. Um, so anticipatory grief feels so much like when somebody dies. It's just, what extreme.
You were already learning how to live without him. And so
Yeah.
it was almost giving you time to begin to come to terms with that in a really, really difficult way. Do you remember some of the emotions you felt when he actually passed in April?
Because I had that period of grieving, like the life that I had, and also Ryan himself. Like I was relieved. There was so much other thing like experiences and emotions. Obviously, I was devastated, but I had really lost him in October, so I had already like not fully processed, but understood that in my rational head. Like I don't have my husband that I knew before. So I just I was very anxious to kind of start that next season in my life, like pick up the pieces, like get back to regular life. Especially with my boys, like, because everything is so chaotic and out of routine. And I wasn't the best version of myself. Like, and I really wanted to get to a point where I became a better version of myself for my kids because I could do that once he died. And I wasn't able to do that before because everything was, everything was about his recovery and then, transitioning him to heaven or like that next stage.
Yeah, it brought a finality to it that allowed you to finally provide, like, really provide closure for yourself and for the boys. I'll be honest, Benny, I just simply have a hard time comprehending a toddler, a newborn, and this situation. I mean, to be blunt, you must have been exhausted.
I was so tired because I wasn't sleeping. Like my child was not sleeping. I was nursing. And like during hospice wasn't even at my house. It was at Ryan's cousin's house. And they didn't have like a rocking chair. So I would sit on the wood floor when I would have to take Leo out of his pack and play to feed him because the bed was too high. And like rock him like on the cold like wood floor and like nurse him until he fell asleep. Like I was not sleeping at all. Like that kind of tiredness, like your whole body hurts.
Do you feel like you've come back to life?
I do. Yeah. It's taken, it's a process and it's not a light switch. It's incremental, small changes coming to life again over time. And it doesn't mean like the pain is gone. It doesn't mean the grief is gone. It doesn't mean the hard days are gone. But, a part of myself that had been completely shut off, that like vibrancy, that coming to life, being able to access joy and gratitude and happiness that has come online again.
So for anyone that knows someone that is experiencing something similar, it sounds like it will get better, though the pain is still there.
Yeah, you learn how to carry it. You know, people say grief like stays the same, like that picture of like the ball in that like box or whatever, and then your life grows around it. But I honestly think that ball becomes a square. It just changes, it transforms as your life also gets bigger around grief. So that ball doesn't stay the same. It becomes something entirely different. And I think it gets smaller and it doesn't get as the sharp edges that it feels like in the heaviness at the beginning. It becomes much easier to carry throughout time.
How have you been able to support your boys as they've gotten older and perhaps I would imagine they inquire or perhaps they don't. But I'd love to know, like as a mom, how you best guide them.
I think the best thing to do is just be completely honest with them, whatever age appropriate language, they're going to have questions. They're going to have really big feelings. Not shaming them for those feelings, not making them feel like it's too much for you. Like when I say like, it was really hard to sit in those moments when my son, right after the accident, was having these like huge blow ups that I'd never experienced before. And I was just like a mess and I didn't even know what to do. And I just would sit with him and let him like throw his pillows or his toys because he needed to get out like whatever was inside of him, and just allowing him a safe space to do that and not getting mad at him and just being like, okay, like this is okay. And when you're done, I'm here.
What's some of the work that you have done to help maintain a sense of normalcy for you? I mean, what if someone is going through something this traumatic an experience, how do they begin to take care of themselves?
I think the first thing is realizing you can't do it by yourself. Like I hired a therapist like 2 days after the accident, like the day after I was on the phone with different trauma and grief therapists trying to get, because I didn't know what to do. Because I had all of these really intense feelings and I'm like, I can't, I need to know what to do with this. And I didn't have the tools then. So realizing that it feels overwhelming because it's not meant for you to carry by yourself and to figure out by yourself. And I have been in therapy, like I'm still in therapy. And now I go to a couples therapist with my fiance, and because all of this is really hard. And it's just nice to have that outlet. But then also finding the tools and strategies and like modalities that work for you to like help you manage and cope with the really intense feeling. So for me, that looks like working out every day because that just sets a really good landscape for being able to deal with anxiety and grief and like all these things that life can throw at you. Journaling and writing. I mean, it is one of the most underutilized tools, but it's also one of the most powerful. And they've done so many studies on it. Like writing out your feelings and your emotions and things that you're ruminating over, it needs a place to go. So writing's really powerful. But it can, it can look different for everyone. It could be taking walks in nature. It can be listening to music. It can be, if you're an artist, like you like art, doing some sort of artistic endeavor. You have to find an expression for all of that stuff to go.
So many people and supporters that are trying to be helpful in a situation like this, they are also very overwhelmed. It's such an unnatural thing that happened to you. One of the most common things I hear is, I want to reach out to someone I love that's going through something really significant and traumatic, but I don't know what to say. So before we get to what to say, what are some things to absolutely avoid saying?
I think anything that tries to fix people's pain is you should steer away from, because people don't want to be made to feel better. Like the best thing you can do is be with someone in their pain and their experience without trying to put a silver lining on it or make it better. And as humans, like our first inclination is to try to fix things. And this isn't something you can fix. And by trying to fix it, you actually make it worse because you're denying someone's reality, that how bad it is. So I think I would steer away from anything that kind of like tries to fix it.
And what about now, I guess on a more positive side? What are some of the things that do make you smile when people reach out to you? Or what are the things that have been meaningful to you now that you're, a couple of years out from the more traumatic parts of this?
I think the number one thing that I love is getting messages from people that I may not even know, like they could be strangers, but they met Ryan and had experiences with him, and they share that with me. And like how he touched their lives. So like stories about your person that maybe you wouldn't have known otherwise, like they wouldn't have told you. I think those are the most pleasant surprises. And then also like on his birthday and like holidays, it's really, I really don't receive like that many messages and texts from people on those days, but from the people that do still reach out and say like, I'm thinking of you on those really hard days or those heavier days, like I really appreciate that.
You have not forgotten those important dates. And so it's nice for people to remember that those dates are still very significant despite the time that might have passed.
Yeah.
I would imagine that is super powerful.
Yeah, exactly. And don't be worried about being annoying. Like, even if somebody doesn't respond to you, like, I promise that they appreciate it.
What inspired you to go on Instagram and share more about this? I mean, you've really leaned in. You've also written a book. I mean, I would imagine that's a lot of things to handle on top of your own grief, being a mom, and also pursuing a new life or a new version of a life. Why go on Instagram? Why do all these things? Like, I'd love to know like more about like how you made that decision.
I think it's twofold. I realized going through this experience of like how much we don't talk about this stuff. And I was so ill prepared for like what happened to me and like how I felt. And I'm like, why don't people talk about all these things that I didn't expect to experience in grief? Like why can't we talk about this? Why can't we open up with these conversations? And I found that when I did open up the door to some of the more like taboo subjects of grief, like feeling relief when my husband died, like all these things that people actually experience that are real and they're valid, but people don't want to say it. I think those are the messages that people relate to the most because they feel like they can't talk about it because people that don't understand would shame them for it or think they're a bad person. But like grief is so tricky and it's so messy and it's not at all what you expect it to feel like or be like. And I think we need to talk about that stuff more. So that's one of the reasons. I wanted people to feel really supportive and seen in what they're going through, even the stuff that they're afraid to talk about. And then secondly, I mean, it was really cathartic for me to share my journey and write about it. Like when I write posts, it's in the beginning, it was mostly for me and I was just like hitting publish, right?
Not a lot of edits, not a lot of reviews, stream of consciousness.
Yeah, like I was writing about my experience and like it felt really good to get that out into the world and just out of me. And over time it has obviously evolved and now it's way more structured and it really is to help people. But it really is cathartic to share your journey.
Well, and it sounds like you said earlier that there's so many research, a lot of research and science that supports the idea of journaling. This has become another journal for you. It's just public.
Yeah, exactly.
For those that might be supporting someone that may be in a similar situation, I guess one of the things I'm curious about is what is the number one piece of advice you have for them?
For the people trying to support grievers,
Yep.
just like show up and have zero expectations and be prepared to be uncomfortable and still show up and be prepared to maybe be yelled at or ignored or like because people are grieving and then that doesn't look pretty. And it doesn't mean they don't love you. It doesn't mean that they aren't grateful for you. They just are too overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And they need support even when they are like the worst versions of themselves because they are not themselves.
Yeah, you talk about some really important themes here, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, and however uncomfortable and awkward it might be for a supporter, it's 100 times harder for the griever themselves. So to show some grace in those moments. I've heard a lot of people talking about how one of the more challenging things is that you grieve relationships because some people don't know how to show up. They're so afraid. They're so uncomfortable with this idea of loss. I'd imagine you had a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, people just don't know how to show up and they feel like if I can't show up perfectly or if I don't know what to do, I'm just not going to show up at all. And they're so afraid to make mistakes. Like, make some mistakes. Like, don't worry about saying the right thing. Like, don't say anything at all. Like, don't even worry about that. Just like be there for the person. And if you don't know them like that well, like send gift cards. Like those things are really helpful. They're so practical. There's so many different ways that you can help. Like you can start a meal train or you can like get together and do like a gift card basket because, like all of these things, the person grieving just wants to have to do that. And they have so much on their plate. So being able to take off some of this other like day-to-day stuff is like the best thing you can do. So they can concentrate on really what's important.
So Whitney, tell people where's the best way that people can find you. And I'd love for you to also do a quick shout out on the book.
Yeah, so you can find me on all social media at Whitney Lynn Allen. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on TikTok and LinkedIn. You can go to my website, whitneylynnallen.com, and my book, What Must Be Carried, is coming out March 5th. And my second book, my first book is out in the world, Running in Trauma Stilettos. You can get that on Amazon. And you can pre-order my second book now as well on my website.
I love it, and I hope many people will rush to support you. I think what you've done is really just tremendous, and taking this extraordinary pain and turning it into effectively a positive for those that are looking for guidance and really, really, really difficult moments. Again, whether you are the griever, the primary griever, or perhaps you're a secondary griever, or simply a supporter that is standing around wondering what I do. And so many of the themes you talk about um, really align, as you know, with the mission of Support Now. And so, as a final note, I want to remind people that if you know someone who might be in a similar situation as Whitney, maybe they're in anticipatory grief, something is very traumatic and imminent. There are lots of ways to showing up for people. And Whitney touched on several of those. It can be money, it can be meals, but it can also be those everyday things. And that is something that I care very deeply about, because I believe that those things are really the things that allow people to have a sense of normalcy in a time that is not normal at all. That's what people, and that's what Whitney is saying, that is what people are craving. They're craving a sense of normalcy. And through Support Now, we offer all that functionality. So if you know someone, please give us a recommendation, spin up a registry. And Whitney, more importantly, thank you to you again for everything you've done. I continue to follow your journey on Instagram. I'm so thrilled that you have found a season of life where you have found love and found an opportunity to move forward again with this grief. And I know I'm not the only person cheering for your happiness and your stability in this new season. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope your listeners get so much out of this.
Thank you.